Welcome to our roundtable discussion on leadership issues in higher education. We'll be examining imperatives for our global future to inform senior policymakers within higher education. Today's panelists include Tamra Griffin, examining community college issues, Brenda Finger, discussing state colleges, Melanie Lawler, looking at private universities, and Ken Long, examining professional schools. We begin today's discussion with Tamra Griffin.
Hi, my name is Tamra Griffin, and I am the Division Chair for Business Technology and Public Service at the University of Arkansas Community College of Batesville. I've been working in higher education for 20 years. The courses that I teach are computer networking, and also I do some online business courses. I'd like to talk about the statistics on community colleges first. That there's a total of like 1,100 community colleges in the United States, and that most of them are public. What's interesting when you look at the statistics on community colleges is that there's almost as many working on credit courses as non-credit. So there's like 7 million students working on their credit side, whereas there's 5 million working on non-credit issues. So that makes a real dynamic for the community college campus. And then there's also 40% enrolled full-time versus part-time, which is 60%. So again, you start looking at that student, and this is a student that's having to do work, has kids, so they're only able to do their college life 40% of the time, and so they have to take part-time courses, whereas that full-time student that can dedicate themselves is a much smaller group. And the average age is 28, so it's a much more mature student. And what I really find interesting is that 42% of them are first generation. So they don't have that background of everybody went to college in our family. These are people that are striving to be the first to get out there, and so they're really motivated, and they really look at things a little differently. So it's very interesting to talk with them. We all took different topics, and mine is community colleges, and where we think those community colleges are going to be in 10 to 20 years, what they're going to need to work on. One of those topics would be the tie with secondary high schools and universities. And looking at that, community colleges are trying to increase their interaction with high schools and have kind of like a 2+2 environment going on. And already we're seeing secondary schools come into play on college campuses. Sometimes they can be at the high school campus, but really I think they need to be on the college campus so that the student starts getting that feel for the college environment, and they want to attend and they want to be there. And what we're seeing is that they're attending during their junior and senior high school years, and then they go straight into finishing up their degree in a minimal amount of time and can get out in the workplace. And so I see more and more of that kind of 2+2 happening between the secondary schools and the community colleges. And that also goes into play with the universities. Community colleges and universities are already starting to do that 2+2. We've always had it with the AA degree, but I'm talking about more like an AS in business, where they'll get exactly the first 2 years of their business degree and start as a junior when they hit the university level. It's just more profitable for the community college and for the universities, and it's much more economic for the student, because the community colleges are traditionally less expensive than the universities. And so they can do their first 2 years and then transfer, maybe get a transfer scholarship into the universities, and then hone their skills and work on that skill set further. And so I do believe the community college and the universities are going to work more and more hand in hand and kind of help each other with that 2+2 kind of environment. Another key area that community colleges really need to be able to understand and look for the future is the ability to adapt to a changing world. And we know everything's changing. And it's key that community colleges are going to be able to interact with the industry and the communities that they actually reside in. We need the community colleges to be able to understand what industry needs quickly and be able just to, within a semester, 2 semesters, no more than a year, be able to implement new designs, maybe even within 8 weeks, to give the skill sets to the students that the industry needs so that they can promote their own businesses. Community colleges need to be focused on that future and how that's going to work. And really, one idea that I would like to see community colleges be able to do is like to have a group, and that group would be volunteers because they'd want to have to be motivated, and they would be the cutting edge kind of group, and they would be looking for programs and for skill sets that students would need, and they could be funneling those ideas into the campus through faculty and curriculum and those kind of keep the campus on the cutting edge. And we see that with the green environment. We see that with the global issues as far as what kind of skill sets do students need to be able to work in a global atmosphere. And so I just think it would be key if we could have that group that's always looking out instead of just being what's happening today or worried about what's happening tomorrow, but a group on campus that could actively be looking for the future and helping the community college stay focused on the future. One of the last concerns I want to hit on is funding. I know all of us, for all our different parts, have had to talk about money, but funding is always crucial, and to community colleges it's the same. State funding is decreasing, and with the decrease we have to figure out where that other money's going to come from. And we've seen, at one time we were probably like 80% funded by the state, and every year it keeps decreasing till we're like at 46. I know several other institutions in other states are even lower as far as funding from their state legislature. And not only are the state legislatures decreasing the amount of funding that they're going to give us, they're also saying, well, even the amount of money we are going to give you, we want to know how you're using it, and so we're going to put qualifications on it, like retention or program completion, and if you don't have those, then you won't get all of your money. And I believe we'll see more and more of that as we go along. And so really it's starting to turn the community colleges in their state community colleges into their chancellors or their presidents are fundraisers. They just go around trying to get money from donors to try to keep the institutions going. And then, of course, you have to raise tuition. And even though our tuition is very low, community colleges historically have low tuition. They're having to increase it just to maintain. And so what we're going to have to look for is just these other ways to keep funding down, but keep our programs going. And one of those ways is technology, of course. And if we can use technology to increase our productivity on the campuses, that would be the best, one of the best ways to go. And I really think, for example, we have an online application now. So the student fills it out instead of a worker in the enrollment center typing it in. And so that saves manpower. And they can be doing other, advising students instead of typing in an application. So we've got to be better at what we do to get things accomplished through productivity and funding. would like to recap what I've talked about so far. And I've talked about, as far as the community colleges are concerned, economic issues, the funding issue, and how we're going to address that in the future. Also politically, our legislatures, being able to communicate with them and make them understand our mission and what we're about. Change is a key component for the community colleges. That is kind of like their niche, and they really, really have to, keep that change going and keep that focus on change and being able to do it quickly and at the best, better than anybody else. And then technology, of course, will help us get there and help us with the economic and the political and the change, helping us hone those skills and help the community colleges be more productive with less. And then the socioculture, is our student itself. They're just unique. And so we really need to tap into that uniqueness and understand where they're coming from and what we can do to help them in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamra. We'll now turn to Brenda Finger to discuss issues for state colleges.
Good afternoon. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Brenda Finger, and I'm a management marketing instructor at Valley City State University, located in North Dakota. I've been affiliated and employed through higher education for over 25 years, serving in both academic and administrative roles and positions throughout that time. I've been employed in state-funded institutions, one on the Minnesota side and now currently on the North Dakota side. I'm going to begin by outlining some critical issues facing higher education, specifically looking at state-funded schools. This presentation will outline those issues and unpack some possible solutions for the future. The past and present environment have created what I'm going to call the perfect storm for higher education. The three critical issues involved in that storm are: 1, schools are seeing dramatic cuts in state support; 2, global competitiveness; and 3, sustaining innovative research. So I'm going to start to unpack those issues one by one, bringing us to the close with possible solutions for us to review. The past 2 decades have led to dramatic cuts in state support for higher education. These cuts, combined with rising costs, are jeopardizing the quality of education and have led to huge tuition increases for students. The social impact of these mounting tuition bills, skyrocketing costs, have reduced access to our universities and have increased the class, race, and ethnic differences in college admission and attendance. The next topic is global competitiveness. The risks to America's global competitiveness are directly related to cuts in public investment in higher education, declining access, increased barriers to international exchange, and these 3 items have been heightened in the wave after 9/11. These have all weakened America's competitive position in the world. The perfect storm has placed us in a very weak position for capturing the world's best and brightest students, faculty, and researchers. The third critical issue that I'm going to highlight today before getting into the possible solutions is sustaining innovative research. All universities in America have and continue to face enormous challenges to sustain innovative research. The rising costs of research tied with funding cuts and the federal budget disaster are issues that American universities must address if they are to remain a source of important scientific breakthroughs. Now I'm going to unpack some possible solutions for the future of higher education. The future of America truly boils down to priorities. The future of higher education leaders must reverse the trend we've encountered in the past 2 decades. States should boost their investment in public education to develop the human capital needed to contribute to the communities. Universities also need to stop focusing where they rank nationally and start spotlighting on the quality of education provided to all students, regardless of race, national citizen, or personal financial situations or circumstances. For the past 2 centuries, American universities have created extraordinary educational systems. Continued collaboration with all partnering relationships who have vital stakes in the system is key to calming the storm.
Thank you, Brenda. We'll now turn to Melanie Lawler to examine private universities.
Hello, my name is Melanie Lawler. I'm a doctoral candidate of management at Colorado Technical University, the coordinator for logistics and entrepreneurship at Truckee Meadows Community College, and a logistics and market consultant for Resolute Capital Holdings. After completing our environmental scan, my colleagues and I identified 3 critical issues facing private four-year liberal arts colleges. First, there is a decreased amount of federal non-repayable aid. Second, there's a decreasing respect for a liberal arts education. And finally, we see increased enrollment in online courses. The first issue my colleagues and I identified is a decreasing amount of non-repayable federal tuition assistance. The formulas used for calculating need that assign Pell Grants and other non-repayable tuition assistance have changed, decreasing the value of these aids packages for students. Students already traditionally have an overage of cost after receiving their aid packages. With decreased non-repayable aid, students will match their lifetime student loans faster and will have less ability to finance an education that extends past their bachelor's, including master's, professional, and doctoral education. For these colleges to continue to attract the brightest students, they are going to have to find more creative ways of financing students' education, particularly as parents become more concerned with children gaining a degree that is valuable immediately after graduation. This is not always the case in private four-year liberal arts institutions. For one example, Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, and for another, Vassar in New York. Financing options may include endowment-funded scholarships, work study, and loans offered through the college. Competition based on aid packages is likely to become much more intense, and finding unique ways to assist students and parents with aid will be a critical skill set for these institutions for the next 25 years. The second issue that my colleagues and I identified is a decreasing respect for a liberal arts education. Liberal arts education has continued to lose respect since it was first developed in the U.S. Milne argues that intellectuals in the U.S. are not favored, and being overly educated can be a negative in our society. A brief Facebook survey on whether people would want to be known as an intellectual resulted in definitive no's, even from intellectuals. Private four-year liberal arts colleges offer a unique value proposition that leads to more students pursuing graduate degrees. Parents and students are more likely in today's economy and in the future to seek a degree that offers a paying position directly after college, such as business, engineering, and nursing. These colleges need to provide a better value proposition for students and parents. While employment and income directly after graduation may be lower, over the long term, with the increased chance of receiving a graduate degree, students are likely to make more over their lifetime. Further, liberal arts degrees encourage broad-based interdisciplinary thinking, which is fundamental to the adaptability that Easterbrook argues for in Sonic Boom. What we see is that while the respect for a liberal arts education may be decreasing, the value of that liberal arts education is actually increasing in today's economy and today's society. The final thing that my colleagues and I identified is that online education is becoming much more popular. The number of students that are taking at least one online course continues to grow each year. The basis of most four-year private liberal arts colleges is the experience on campus. However, as Bridges argues, the college experience is changing, and we can continue to expect it to change. This means that this type of institution needs to pursue ways to translate their offerings, their experience, and their network of connections through an online, more flexible format for students. Whitman College does not even offer any online courses, and they limit the number of online courses that can be accepted into their curriculum. While online curriculum is gaining in acceptance and respect, there is still a stigma that online courses are not as rigorous as live classroom courses. For institutions to compete, they will need to find ways to ensure the rigor of online coursework and then be able to offer that in a consistent manner to students who may attend from Africa, Latin America, or Asia without ever getting on a plane. It can open the pool of students, increase diversity, and develop larger, more international networks for these institutions. The challenge is to create these offerings in such a manner that they result in the same experience as being on campus, while still being in the virtual world. This means that traditional learning management systems like Angel, WebCT, and Moodle may not be sufficient, and that the exploration of programs like Second Life become more critical in differentiating the online offering of this program against a Walden or University of Phoenix. One institution that's trying this is Marylhurst University in Oregon. They offer both an online and an on-campus option for their degrees. However, their online offering is incredibly similar to Walden or University of Phoenix, with required posts to discussion forums, reading, quizzes, and papers. There's no differentiation of this product against any of the others. So while it's still a small liberal arts program, it offers to differentiate its online experience in the same way that it differentiates its on-campus experience. In conclusion, for private four-year liberal arts colleges to establish a competitive advantage in the future, there's three things we see them needing to really do. The first is get creative and find alternate tools for funding students' educations. Second, develop better messaging about the value proposition of a liberal arts education in the current economy and the future economy. And finally, they need to take the lead in developing standards and technology for online education. If you're a private four-year liberal arts college and you can complete these three steps, we think that you can gain and sustain a competitive advantage in the future.
Thank you, Melanie. And now in our last section, I will be taking a look at issues for professional schools. Good afternoon. This is Ken Long coming to you live from the U.S. Army's Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where I'm an assistant professor of logistics and organizational change management and a curriculum designer concerned with developing global net-centric learning organizations. I'm going to be talking about issues for professional schooling with insights from the intersection of three professions that I'm familiar with. First, I've been an Army officer for 25 years with global assignments in peacetime and in war. I've been teaching as a professional educator for strategic planning and change management for 10 years. And for the last 15 years, I've been the president and chief researcher of a global financial advisory service with institutional and hedge fund clients around the world. There are many professions around the world engaged in doing good work for people everywhere. They share many common qualities that you see listed on the screen. At their very best, they bring together high quality, deep theoretical knowledge and informed practice to deliver good works to the people. We usually think of professions as being motivated by a spirit of public service and altruism, and for which they are highly rewarded with status and pay. The education that it takes to develop true professional expertise is extensive and largely self-regulated by the profession. Through associations, they're involved in selection, testing, licensing, and certification, and usually have some form of legal recognition for the work that they do. So let's take a little bit deeper look into the needs of professional education in the future, because we're in a moment of global transition where professional expertise within your technical domain is no longer sufficient to deal with the challenges of the modern world. Theorists of complex adaptive systems, for example, talk about global networks that are increasingly tightly coupled with reinforcing feedback loops and potentially catastrophic consequences developing from almost chance occurrences. We see that in the vulnerability of energy platforms in the Gulf or in the well-known butterfly effect. So it's no longer sufficient for professionals to simply be concerned with the technical expertise and the demands of their profession. We've now got to start thinking beyond our boundaries and looking at the overlap between professions to find some commonality and a professional ethic that will allow us to continue to deliver high-quality service to the people. We've also got to find those spaces in between professions where there's no one profession that can lay claim, and figure out some way to address this problem of the commons with respect to service to the nation and to the entire globe. Because one thing we know about globalization is that we can no longer think about inside our national borders exclusively. We've got to start considering the second, third order effects of our policies and taking a deeper, systematic look at the world around us. So let's unpack that a little bit and see what else we can find. Now, professional education, like all higher degrees, have always had these four classic challenges. They are charged with generating new knowledge, conserving best practices, transforming new generations of professionals to equip them to engage in the world in a practical way. And they're entrusted with the stewardship of the profession in the world, self-regulation, monitoring performance, codes of ethics, and so forth. All these things still have to happen in our professional education. They are necessary, but they're no longer sufficient to address the issues that I described earlier. The problem of complexity and uncertainty in an increasingly global and connected world. So let's take a look now at the challenges to professional education in the future that go beyond these traditional requirements. Things like tightly coupled global networks with reinforcing feedback loops that cause potentially catastrophic second and third order effects far beyond our ability to forecast if we're using traditional methods. We've got to find ways that we can begin to decouple and put some slack into these global networks so that we have the ability to adapt when we get surprised by consequences, and yet still maintain the efficiency and the benefits of being connected globally. Now, we've got modern populations that are demanding new forms of professional service. As the information age makes technology and higher living standards available to wider sets of people, more people are beginning to demand their fair share of the pie. So how does governments that are conservative social control structures adapt in order to meet an increasing demand from their populations? Time is running out, resources are not broadly available, and yet they still have to manage their populations in a way that is respectful of individuals and realistic compared to their resourcing. Professionals are involved in the delivery of just these kinds of services and are always going to be involved in policy decisions between the people and their government. Overlapping and underlapping professional domains refers to a need for two different professions, for example, to find common ground in areas of mutual interest. The Santa Fe Institute has conducted some groundbreaking work in this area. And yet we've also got to somehow take responsibility for the problem of the commons, areas of concern and interest to populations for which there is not a single profession that is clearly in charge. We've got to find some way to develop a community of concerned professionals from many different disciplines to start dealing with new and emerging requirements. As we become more globally connected and more culturally aware, professions are going to have to find ways to take the sensibility of their internal codes of ethics and incorporate cultural insights and yet still maintain a professional standard that is adaptive to local circumstances. And finally, as we've seen in every other level of higher education, a concern for a continuous funding that will permit growth of the workforce and extend the boundaries of knowledge, both in research and in application. We've got to find some way to have continuous funding support for long-term projects that are not tied to legislative sessions that last 1 to 2 years and which are subject to political pressure. We see the problems now in Wisconsin and with shrinking school budgets across the nation. So how we secure that stream of funding so that we can make a consistent priority of our future education for higher education is going to be crucial. To do all that, our professionals have to get outside of the technical boundaries of their profession and start engaging with fellow professionals, with politicians, with the community at large to start making the case for a need for a robust professional education infrastructure. We've got to become involved in local, regional, national, and global politics in order to have a voice in the discussion, to have a seat at the table. We've got to find ways to engage in a professional and human way. So where do we go from here? What are our 5 global imperatives? It seems clear that we've got to incorporate systems thinking and risk management into every profession, thinking about the second and third order consequences of our policies and to look at the consequences beyond the boundaries of our profession. We've got to be committed to values like social justice for all, to ensure that all populations have fair and equitable access to the resources that are generated by technology and free markets. We've got to have integrated cooperation between professions, and that means reaching out beyond our boundaries, engaging in multidisciplinary workshops, conferences, projects, and understanding each other's language, and developing a common professional ethic with respect to supporting populations. Global outreach is absolutely necessary. We can't be bound just by the needs of the nation or the regions or our local community. We've got to somehow incorporate this professional ethic worldwide so that there is a counterforce to some of the social and military and political tensions that separate us. We've got to find perhaps the professional glue that binds us together as citizens of the world. And finally, secured stable funding means that we have got to generate internally streams of resources that will allow us to continue to find, educate, train, and mentor the younger generation so that they can be full participants in our professional venture going forward. All of these elements taken together share the common feature of engaging beyond the technical constraints of our profession and engaging in a global and a human and a social way. Now, looking back through our individual briefings, there are themes that are common to all. Things like the need for teamwork and partnership between echelons in higher education and among the professions. Integrating our plans for growth and development and education with the people that we support in local communities and globally. The idea that through education we can work on our common humanity and build a peaceful future for the world. The need to continually prioritize education and research funding to compete with other social demands. A need for global engagement to bring a community of people closer together. All of these themes taken together drive the requirement for transformative action. Individual projects with limited scope are not enough. We've got to have grand visions of what can be possible in order to pull together the resources that are needed to make these transformations real. We thank you for your time. We encourage you to consider our recommendations deeply, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks.